the Executive Secretary of Zimbabwe Community Groups.
My name is Washington Kapapiro. I'm the chairman for the Association for African-Owned Enterprises. We're the leading organization who represent professional and entrepreneurial Africans in the UK.
My name is Rodoma Zembi. I'm a nurse. I'm a community district sister in Wales. Just to make it short, that's who I am.
I'm Reverend Zembi. I'm based in Wales. Actually, I did social sciences and I'm running a small business, import and export, cleaning businesses, and actually doing pastoral work in Wales.
My name is Patrick Simbarashi Nyananda. I am the head of Zim Online Radio. Basically, Zim Online Media, which is a radio station and online newspaper and also social portal.
My name is Barbara Nyagomo. My first profession. Nyagomo. Nyagomo.
Dr. Manyiruke is chair of the Political Science Department at USET. Dr. Charity Manyiruke. I last passed through London in 1986. That is a long time ago. It is indeed. Some of you may not have been born. And this time around I'm here. I'm the first ZANU-PF minister to be invited to the UK by the British government for some political discussion. We came here as a committee, as members of the committee on the re-engagement. After the inclusive government was formed, and both of us now realize that sanctions were hitting our people, there was now a collective voice over that issue. A re-engagement committee comprising myself, Mr. Mangoma from MDCT, and Mrs. Rabi from MDC was put together to lobby for the lifting of sanctions. We have had previous visits to 3 visits to Brussels, but nothing has been coming out. So when we visited Brussels last year, we made it clear that clearly the way we saw it, the ball was in their court. And when they are ready, they will tell us, but otherwise we will not waste our time to visit them. And we have always maintained, as you know, that the issue, the problems around Zimbabwe were a bilateral problems between the British and Zimbabwe, and revolving around the resolution of the land question, which is the last outstanding issue, a colonial issue to be resolved. It's a decolonizing issue, and its satisfactory resolution will make us a truly free country. So anyway, they invited us, and we arrived on Monday, and maybe just for those of you who may not know the background, it's important, I think, to understand why we have this rift between us and Zimbabwe, between the UK and Zimbabwe. Some of you be aware, our whole struggle was centered around the land question. That is why people decided to pay the ultimate price. It was basically to regain repossession of our land. In 1979, when the Langas House Conference was held, we were persuaded that resources would be made available. There were commitments that resources would be made available, primarily by the British, but also assisted by the American allies. Resources were to be made available to government to pay for compensation to white farmers. All was well with the Thatcher administration and also with the John Major administration. We were at talking terms. With the Major administration, we actually negotiated a land reform program where the British were to provide the resources for us to acquire 5 million hectares of land. As you know, at independence, even up to 1990, 4,000 white farmers had something like 15 million hectares of land. So we had negotiated with the major government to acquire 5 million of that. Unfortunately for John Major, and unfortunately for us, unfortunately for the destiny of our country, for the revolution, John Major lost in the 1997 elections, and Blair came in. When he came in, we raised the issue about compensation, about the agreement we had reached with John Major, and basically reminding him that he was a successor administration to John Major. He refused to talk to us. He also refused to talk to our president, completely. And as a result, and before we knew what was happening, he started putting out accusations that we had problems about human rights and that we were violators of human rights. That was a lie to the British people, primarily to hide away from the fact that the dispute between us was the land issue. I don't know. The dispute between us was a land issue. And in fact, what incensed us, what angered us, was that Blair started lying, started telling us, or telling whoever cared to listen, why would Mugabe want to chase away from farmland white farmers who are productive, who have the skills, who are more productive than black people? Why should they not keep the land in those hands so that the white people can continue producing for them? As you can appreciate, given our revolutionary history, that was clearly raising a red flag in our face. We could not, as a black government, run a country on the premise that black can't do that, can't do this, can't produce, no, we don't do it that way. So we took a stand that we should fulfill the major issue, about the core issue, which was the underlying cause in our liberation struggle. So I'm just sketching out so that you understand the dispute. So when Blair took the position that he must put a stop to the land question, to the redistribution, he put out those lies about us. But he went further. He persuaded other political parties represented in the House of Commons to put up a fund, the Westminster Foundation, to fund the start of an opposition party, the MDC. That's how they did. And it's public. These are figures and statements in the public domain. And primarily it was to stop us from redistributing the land, from fulfilling one of the key issues in our liberation struggle. So the struggle then started, and I think some of it are aware what has been happening. Sanctions were imposed, and sanctions hate our people. Basically, they've hate our economy. The social infrastructure is run down. I'm talking about education, health is run down. The road infrastructure, Zimbabwe has now almost now a reputation for potholed highways. Everything got run down. Generation capacity, we couldn't access soft loans from the World Bank, although we are a member. We couldn't have balance of payment support from IMF, although we are a member. And what is worse, at the time that this quarrel was picked up by the British, the industry and commerce was dominated by British companies, who then, taking the coup from their government, that is the British government, downgraded their operations. Some even closed, some downsized, some closed completely and went to other to other places. So this at a time when we had no meaningful economic link with any other country outside South Africa, the Europe and the British. In 2000, we had no economic link whatsoever with Seth Fires, none. So as a result now of the challenges that we were facing, we then adopted the Look East policy in order to continue fighting while basically living on a care and maintenance basis. So essentially, that's what has been happening these past years. And I was telling Chigwagwa and Mozambique that if he had come in 2008, we were at our worst moments. We were at our worst moments. But given our liberation history, they were not able to bear us in 2008. That had been the intention, to wipe us out completely. Because the countries which imposed sanctions, not only imposed sanctions, but they embarked on a regime change agenda. And sanctions were basically about effecting a regime change agenda, meaning eliminating ZANU-PF as a key political player from the landscape, political landscape of Zimbabwe. So they mounted that onslaught and they failed in 2008, which basically bears testimony to the strength of our liberation experience. If we did not have that resilience as we had accumulated and acquired during the liberation struggle, we could have been completely off the scene in 2008. But another aspect of the sanctions which basically was more evil was basically to deny ZANU-PF a voice in those countries which imposed sanctions. Through the media, we were not allowed. Anything that we did was not reported. It's like a non-event. If we were involved in a fight with, say, inter-party, we attacked back, and so on, only the attack by ZANU-PF will be reported. In other words, we had to defend ourselves. And when we were defending ourselves, that is what was reported in the media is assault on MDC, and as if, again portraying as if there was no provocation. So, and when we explained, again nothing was explained, nothing was published. So that is the environment which characterized our British-Zimbabwe relationship from almost 1997. It has not been easy. It has not been easy for us. But fortunately for us, because they failed to fail us in 2008, time is a great healer. And our people now see what we were talking about. Especially, they now see our vision, we now share our vision. Our vision primarily is that colonialism left us with nothing. And even come to 2000 or so, black people had nothing. And there is clearly, we will be stupid to be ministers of government, to have soldiers, police, defending an economy in which we had no stake. So our message now, and this is the message that our people has resonated with our people, is that we need to increase the involvement and participation of Zimbabweans in our economy, both in terms of ownership of assets and also in terms of management of those assets. It should be just not management, but also ownership. We need blacks to be key players in their own country. And already that is beginning to take root in Zimbabwe. We are now finding Zimbabweans in sectors that were almost undreamt of 14 years ago, which is a very positive sign and a very positive, in a very positive direction. So what I think you need to know about indigenization, economic empowerment, is that we want blacks to be in control of their resources, to be in charge of their resources in every sense. We want the economy to be Zimbabwean, not just in the name, but in the sense that Zimbabweans have a stake. They've 90% or 80% ownership and 100% management of that economy. We want it to be a British in the same way that British economies. The key players in this economy are British. In the same way that in Germany, the key players are German. So while we appreciate that we are starting from zero, and we appreciate that it's a process, but we have already started that journey. That first step, we have taken it. And which means that, and this is my view, my vision of the future, we should look at each sector, study it, and understand why, to what extent it's already owned and managed by Zimbabweans, and if not, what the causes are, and have adopted strategies that basically address those shortcomings. If it is skills, then we look for them, where to find them. If it is foreign capital, then we try to see whether we can woo foreign capital to match our own resources and to match the human capital that, fortunately for Zimbabwe, we have been able to build over the years since independence. So basically, that is. So when they invited us on, we came here on Monday. There was a reception on Monday evening, and it was hosted by Minister for Africa, Mark Simmons, and he spoke. Basically, this was repeated even in the private meeting that we held with him the following day on Tuesday. Basically, his message is they wanted to re-engage Zimbabwe bilaterally. They recognize and acknowledge that the problem is bilateral, and that one of the issues, key issues, to be discussed in that bilateral discussion, if any, is the land question. They also said that they are not on to stop to do to effect a regime change agenda. That's what they say. But so my response was over engagement. We never disengaged from the British. It was they who disengaged from us. And that when they are seriously ready to engage us, they know where to find us. Because this rift since 1997, it's not us who caused it, it's Blair. So if and when they decide to seriously take that extra step to engage us bilaterally, they will know where to find us. Only their statement that they will not continue with the regime change agenda, I said time will tell. But we will remain cautious. Even as we talk to them, we remain cautious, we will remain vigilant. And we will, like the proverbial cat, sleep with one eye open. So that basically is my response on the issue about regime change agenda. On the question of sanctions, we said there can be no full normalization of relations until all sanctions are removed. And the facade or the charade that you experience where they say we have lifted sanctions, in fact suspended sanctions, which is not lifting, by the way, is suspending. Suspending something is not the same thing as lifting. Suspending means you remain suspended.
But you are there.
Yes, it's there. Whereas lifting, you are basically removing and putting it somewhere else. So we understand that semantics. So we have said until sanctions are lifted, we will not have any meaning, there will be no normalization of relations. So that is where, with respect to re-engagement, that is where basically we are. I don't know, the next step is going to be their step. As far as I can see, I don't foresee anything before the elections. We also said to them, because I picked up that they are very keen to come and observe our elections. So I made it very clear that we will not invite them, because the issue about elections being observed is basically in the entire discretion of the country whose elections are to be observed. And we said that we are not going to invite those representatives from countries which have imposed sanctions against Zimbabwe. So that we gave them that message. For you who are in the diaspora, it's important to understand that you will not have a vote. And the reason basically is that for the past 14 or so years, you have been captive audience. I don't mean you only, but some of you have mental rigor to withstand it, but not everyone. You have been captive audience to a British viewpoint, MDC viewpoint, and none from ZANU-PF. And generally, if we are seeking votes from an electorate, from a people, all of us must be accessible. You should not be only accessible only to one group. All of us should be accessible to that constituency. We seek to woo people to vote for us. And in this case, it's not been accessible to us. This is the first time that perhaps we are meeting a ZANU-PF minister in as many years, in 14 and a half years. But even then, I come here under to come here, it's in the discretion again of the British government. Now, we can't have a constituency where you can't come and go as and when you want. The fact that there is not that freedom of movement means that you are not accessible also. Even if there were other considerations which were favorable for you, even if we were all coming, the fact that my coming is dependent on the discretion of the British government, it's like they are doing me a favor, and again, because the regime change agenda, they will not exercise that discretion in our favor. So I want you to understand that. But those of you who have resources can come and register and come and vote. There is no problem about that. Then the other issues, I think I've touched on the sanctions. There is another issue which keeps cropping up. When are the elections going to take place, and so on. Our referendum went very well. Despite the usual detractors, they went exceedingly well. And one thing that makes me proud as a Zimbabwean is that whatever challenges that we have confronted or we have faced over the past 14 or so years, all those challenges have been resolved through dialogue among Zimbabweans without an imposed solution, without interference from anyone. That makes me proud because it gives us, it means that we have the capacity to resolve and to address our challenges. We started a dialogue with them, with MDC, and I was representing ZANU-PF from 2000. They were on and off on. I was then discussing with Professor Nube when they were still a united MDC. And we went very far to the extent between the two of us, we produced the Kariba draft. Then later on, the respective parties recognized the work we were doing and gave us, each was then represented. When they split up, then we became a threesome. And each of us was represented by two negotiators. Comrade Goshendai representing ZANU-PF, Ncube at that time, and Mr. Rambui representing MDCM at that time, and BT and Mangoma representing MDCT. So that's how we have been. So subsequently, we went to do a lot of changes to the Constitution number 17, although they reneged the last time, the last moment, to do with irreversibility of land. But fortunately, ZANU-PF had a majority in the House. We passed it without them. But it's something that we negotiated and agreed. Because the problem is that with the MDC people, if we talk to ourselves as Zimbabweans, we quickly agree, because we all know the reality of our situation. It's when they then go to consult their white friends that they come wanting to change the goalposts and so forth, clearly indicating that their interests are not the same interests as those people who are financing them or who are advising them. But anyway, the long and short of it is that we were able to agree and sign the global political agreement. Every word there was drafted by us without anyone interfering. In the wording, where to put the comma, where to put the full stop. Similarly, we agreed that we'll go to a review of the Constitution that we tried to do from the Lancaster House Conference. We succeeded, went to the people and succeeded to produce a draft, which we have put to a referendum. And basically the referendum has been able to adopt it. Now, the stages that are going to follow after the 16th are that the bill, a constitutional amendment bill, was gazetted actually on Thursday. I was away, but I knew it was going to be gazetted on Thursday. And we introduced it in Parliament only after 30 days, computed from Thursday. So we start counting Friday onwards. Then only after 30 days can you, in terms of the constitutional requirement. Then after that, it's ascended to, if it passes through the House, and I don't see any difficulties in passing it through the House. After that, it will be ascended to. Then we begin amendments to the electoral law to align the electoral law to the new constitution. As you know, the new constitution allows for a women's quota. We agreed that we should make efforts to increase women participation and involvement in decision-making institutions. And we are starting with the Parliament, both House of Assembly and Senate. For instance, I will give you just to show you how thinly represented they are. Currently, there are probably something like what, roughly say 310, something like that. Of that 310, we are lucky to have 25 women. So it's a men's world, a men-dominated world, and we are trying to abide by AU and SADC conventions, which require that we should start a process to enhance their participation in decision-making up to, say, 50%. Although they are 52%, if we can get somewhere there, it will be very good. In a local government, their participation is actually great. I was being given the figures by Comrade Muchingule. I was quite surprised. We have 1,980 or something like that, wards countrywide. Of those councillors, which means we should have, barring deaths and so on, we should have 1,980 or thereabouts councillors. Of that, women are about 900, which already is a very good start. It's a good start. So the problem is with Parliament and the Senate. So we have that women's quota. Now, when we are amending the electoral law, we have to take into account that. We also have to take into account the fact that the Senate, we have done away with senatorial constituencies and introduced proportional representation. We have also introduced a new organ in the provinces called Provincial Council. So Chigwagwa, who was in local government, would know. We used to have Provincial Council, but it was basically of civil servants.
Heads of ministries,
Yeah, but this time it will be made up ex officio of all those members of parliament, both to the Senate and the House, who come from that province. They will be ex officio members, plus 10 who are going to be elected through proportional representation. The election to the Senate through proportional representation is on the basis of a party list system, 6 per province. So each party will put up a party list of 6 people. And those 6 people will, should I say, will be follow a zebra pattern, starting with a woman at the top. So it will be a woman, a man, a woman, a man, a woman, a man on that list. And because it's starting with the women, it means it will be favoring women's getting into parliament. Because the first round from all the parties will throw up women, isn't it? Will throw up women wherever you're looking at. Will throw up women. So that is something that we are very proud about. So after that is done, after those amendments, then we start the electoral process. Then there will be a proclamation by the president, nomination day, and election date. What I think you need to know is that the life of our parliament ends on the 29th of June. Which means that if, but the constitution allows us to have elections after 29th of June, but will then be governing without a parliament. Something that we should try to avoid, because it could create a vacuum which could precipitate a crisis, and we should try to avoid that. We have been refused and denied a voice in the British political landscape. In fact, in all the countries that have imposed sanctions, not only because of the travel bans, but also just the reporting. It has been so skewed, so biased, full of distortions, misinformation, disinformation, lies, that clearly when I read about myself, I can't recognize myself. Because I know what I do. You understand? I can't recognize myself. Neither my wife. They lie about what we've said, they lie about what we've done, and it's almost futile to counteract it, because the whole thing is so coordinated and so rampant that you can't get a voice, CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera, they just shut us out. So as a result, we appear like we are monsters, when in fact we are just ordinary human beings. To a point that some of us, especially in the UK, have been made to believe the lies. And so their picture of me, of my colleagues, is basically those lies. And when sometimes we've had the privilege of meeting, they can't also believe it's me. I have to basically shout and say, please touch me, it's me. This is me, because their picture about me is also a very distorted picture. It's a picture of one who has been put out as a murderer, as every evil that you can think of, they've put out against me. But because it was very clear that we are fighting a just cause, what you always need in any fight is a cause. In our case, it has been a privilege for us to fight a good cause. A fight which basically means that we are laying a foundation for future generations, so that they know that Zimbabwe is their country and there is no other one. They can be treated like rubbish anywhere else, but they should know that when they come to Zimbabwe, the sky is the limit in terms of opportunities. Just that notion that the sky is the limit is a very good notion. Whereas in the environment you are operating, you know, it's there is an invisible ceiling. And so invisible that you could end up not believing in yourself because you don't see it. You then think it's because of your inability or incapacity, when in fact it's not. Because either you are looked at as a black person or as a foreigner. Whichever way, you know the black person is at the bottom of the social pile. You can't dream of owning a bank, insurance company, and so on. But when you are talking, the sky is the limit. In fact, I tell people the wealthiest Zimbabweans now are not my age group. They are your age group, probably his age group. He looks young. You know, 35 below, 48 below. Those are the people who've made money. Those are the people who own your, I mean, everything. In fact, it's like, if you refer to farmers like the green fingers, it's like what they touch turns to gold and money. But personally, I understand it because you have more skills than we have. You've been exposed better than we have. So you see opportunities where we don't see them. Our whole education was completely different. Probably more towards academic than earning a living, because we were all made to train to say you must look for employment to a white man and keep the job. Please, and behave.
Don't get fired.
Don't get fired. Behave and keep the job. You understand? So we were trained to be an employee. Now we hope to train a generation which believe they can be employers. And already those of you who come home, I've seen a lot of that. It's on a small scale, but a lot of people now are employers in their own right. They may employ 5 people, 10 people, but they're employers. Something that in fact was unheard of and unthinkable, except if you were a shop owner at Machipis. You know? So the opportunities have now expanded. And I mean what I said. Now, the other thing I want you to understand is you'll hear, and I'm sure as we go towards election, there will be allegations flying all over. ZANU-PF is a violent party. ZANU-PF is a violent party. The truth of the matter is that we, as Zimbabweans, we have a culture of violence. And there's been intra-violence, intra-party, within our respective parties, within their MDC formations, especially when we come and go towards primary elections. But there is also inter-party, where supporters of MDC will provoke and throw stones at supporters of ZANU-PF, and the fight begins, and there is a fight and it's reported. Now, the unfortunate thing has been when the inter-party violence is reported, only ZANU-PF is reported as the culprit, when in fact it's a shared culpability, shared responsibility. So when we started negotiating the global political agreement, the first thing we discussed was what to do with who caused the political violence of 2008. And we all agreed that our supporters were all to blame. And we made a joint press statement, basically saying we are all to blame. So the responsibility to deal with political violence is basically a collective responsibility. So as we go towards the elections, it is something that we have to work hard collectively to ensure that we keep rein on our supporters, that they don't get overly excited. That is very, so you need to know is both sides. Our president has been speaking endlessly about keeping the peace and that we don't want any violence, we don't want the forthcoming elections to be marred by violence. That we've been mentioning. So I'm hopeful the referendum went well, but the referendum is different from election because there is no contestation. In particular with this one, once the political parties had agreed that there will be no, we were agreed on the draft, it meant that would go basically as one. And there was no basis on which people can start getting at each other's throat. The issue that in fact I raised with the so-called Friends of Zimbabwe, with whom we had meeting on Tuesday, is that they should stop the regime change agenda which they've been perpetrating through NGOs. Some of you may not be aware, we have over 3,000 NGOs in Zimbabwe. Small as we are, we have more than 3,000 NGOs. And those NGOs, they have nothing to show for it. They are one man, one woman, briefcase NGOs. Basically carrying out an agenda to destabilize, to provoke, to put out and send to the capitals of foreign capitals lies upon lies upon lies. That is the tragedy of our country right now. So, especially those of you who are on the internet, you see the internet awash with nothing just but lies, lies, lies. If you were to make an opinion or to take a decision on the basis of what you read on the internet or what you read in the press, foreign press, you get it off the ground. In Zimbabwe at the moment, as you know, we opened up space. There are a lot of now private newspapers. We now have 2 radio stations, as you know, Star FM and ZFM. I think there will be many more probably opening up, say, community radio stations. So the space has been opened up greatly. And you need to know also that there are 3 pirate radio stations which broadcast, dedicated to Zimbabwe, broadcasting into Zimbabwe in airspace, demonizing ZANU-PF, demonizing President Mugabe, demonizing anything that is ZANU-PF and so on. That is shortwave Radio Africa is beamed from here. Studio 7 beamed from Washington. Voice of the People beamed from the Netherlands. Dedicated to demonizing ZANU-PF and so on. So you have those networks beaming into our airspace. This is to complement the sanctions, the NGOs in effecting regime change. So I say, like I said earlier, we are very strong to have withstood the onslaught that was unleashed against us in 2008. If we had not gone, we had not had the liberation history and resilience, we would have been swept off the board, clearly, because the pressure was intense. So we have told them that these NGOs must stop provoking us, because what they do, they are committing crimes, because without committing crimes they will not achieve their regime change agenda. But when they get arrested, they shout. And when they shout, obviously those who send them are the first to make the most noise. Shona inoti, kana uchida handiti mumwe unokwanisa kuona mhuri yakarara isingazivi kuti mai wayo ngeupi. Ukabata mhuri yacho, mai wacho anobva adini, anobva auya, ndiwobva watomuziva kuti uyu ndiye mai wacho. You understand? And that is basically what is happening with these NGOs.
You touch any one of them, you find the noise reverberates in the Western world to our Hitler, because we are basically touching where it's hitting them. You see. So you need to know kunema NGOs, and some of these challenges you need to understand that no, tisina any way to conduct you. Personally, hatichazivi kuti NGO ndiani, asine NGO ndiani. Do you understand? So sometimes you blame us for no basis. Isu tiri kutotambura, tiri kutoti tatsva, tiri kutsvaka kumusana nekudumbu. Titoti adataona vanotibetsera kuti, but we also know that those who have tried to come out to be our voice here have been haunted, almost haunted. Another Msipa like you know, have been haunted. And as a result, of course, we understand the situation, the environment you are living in. So sometimes I didn't know that will come from that far to come and beat us, quite honest. I feel flattered and very impressed. That commitment in it, the fact that they thought that is you had to come and visit me, I feel very impressed. And I'll report it when I go back. I'll report it with there are some cadres. There may have been some break in terms of communication between us and them, but we have people who are quite dedicated to the cause. As you know, SADC has been has played a facilitating role in all our problems. But what I noticed, of course, is that the Western countries would want SADC to impose a solution. So we made it clear that the role of a facilitator is to facilitate and not to impose. Facilitation means that if we put all our concerns on the table and we are discussing, and somehow we find we are not able to find each other for some reason, you can call from man outside and say, here is our problem. How do you see it? You understand? And then they can find ways of facilitating so that we can reach a common ground. But you can't say everything. It's almost like, it's not different from a family. If every day you are finding someone from outside to counsel you in your marriage, it's very clear the marriage is failed. Every step, in the morning, you want someone to come and in the afternoon, in the evening, I just go walk in a bedroom. You understand? So, yes. So it has to be. So we have to watch that, and I think we are very conscious to do that. I think I've already discussed about indigenization. I think we all understand that. There have been statements about arrest, selective arrest, and so on, and we deny that because people have been put up to effect regime change. To effect the regime change, you need to do criminal things. And because they are criminal things, sometimes you get away because they don't come to the notice of the police. But sometimes, and then you are caught by the police. And the police have to do what they are there for. They arrest you and they charge, and it's up to the court to decide whether the police or the accused is telling the truth. So that is another aspect that you find we come under quite some heavy criticism. So anyway, I thought that that completes my brief. Yes, I think since after the meeting with the meeting with Chinamasa, but basically we more or less went through the same ground as we did when we meeting of the Friends of Zimbabwe. In the meeting of the Friends of Zimbabwe, I said, I don't think you are our friends, because friends don't impose sanctions against each other. And besides, our experience is that the so-called friends of Libya went on to spearhead the bombing of Libya.
Yeah.
And right now, they are so-called friends of Syria who are arming the Syrian rebels. So we must remain cautious and vigilant. Yeah, we must remain cautious and vigilant. I think that I finished my piece.
Okay, thank you, Honorable Minister, for such a well thought out researched position, which I think goes a long way in our history as putting up a cornerstone in guarding our own sovereignty. And I think we'll just put it across the house that people can maybe ask one or two questions to have an insight into some of the discussion areas.
I have a few other questions.
Yeah, sure.
Some of them they're just suggesting.
I hope that at the end of the day you will make me a list of your names, telephone number, and email.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
As well,
we
also,
want
before you go back, we'll have you have a copy of the recording as well.
That's even better.
Yeah.
That's even better.
Yeah.
I'm more sophisticated. No, I'm impressed. That's very good.
I'm going to ask maybe a question, then another one later, so that I'll give it from
please.
Some of them from my experience as a media practitioner.
Yeah,
so,
okay.
The first one that I have is more of a question as well as a suggestion. The world has evolved technologically.
Yeah.
We are now into the fiber optics era, where everything's now electronic and yes. I was hurt when I heard you say how much the nationalistic the heart of government has been blocked out. The ZANU-PF side of the government blacked out systematically and strategically. And we as the younger generation, and also in view of also because I have an 11-year-old son and a 5-year-old son, so I look at that, I look in retrospect, this is also the future of our legacy, exactly. I feel we are also not playing so much a part to engage and also to play a part in that network. Now, you mentioned 3 internet-based radio stations which have been in Zimbabwe and which demonized Zimbabwe. Why don't we also, not as a counter, but as also take advantage of the resources, the expertise, and capable Zimbabweans that are passionate about Zimbabwe as well, and also do something that is very close. Marere wandakaitwa in the Noyo and it's spoken, all it takes for evil to prevail is that the right remains silent. So if we have the good policies, we have it all, why don't you take advantage of that systematic, of that digital era as well and play a part? That will be the first part of it. And that also enhance engagement. Engagement doesn't, we cannot, I know we do have restriction that you are, like you said, it can be at their discretion.
But internet can be
internet can, like I say that 3 times I've had Honorable Kasukwere on the radio, and he was talking to the world live, to the entire world. And when Professor Mtambala came here, the Deputy Prime Minister, for the, was it 4 hours, was it?
Yeah.
He was live to the whole world. So we slowly, when we started, it was quite a challenge, I must be honest with you. I'm sure Chikwangwa can actually tell how much I was told he must be deported, he is a murderer, is all those kind of things. But resiliently, I was trained out of resilience. We stayed, and we are gaining prominence on the social network of the group that is 64,000 Zimbabweans who are pro-Zimbabwean, proactive, and if we are going to have, where we have engagement with the Minister of Justice, with the Minister of Water Resources, the Minister, regular interactions about the kind of things, I feel at the end of the day, it might not match, it might not be so much, but it will at least give people somewhere where they can easily get at least our voice heard, and our unbiased and our undiluted voice heard. That will be my first part. And I'll leave it to
Can I just say something in support of that? I think one of the things that we've seen as an organization who looks at Africans as a community in the UK, we found that a lot of governments and other ministers who've tried to engage with communities, it seems as though they've struggled to identify really effective media houses and platforms to engage with. Is that something that you've experienced yourselves? I mean, I know there's been 14.5 years when you haven't been able to identify the Zim online radios.
Well, this is my first meeting, basically to do with Zim online. Since I came, it has been one BBC interview after another. Focus on Africa, Newsday, Hard Talk, and World Service, BBC World Service. I have not had an opportunity to engage the media here outside that. Tomorrow, before I leave, I'm going to appear or to talk on a community radio station. Something has been organized for me by Zimbabweans. And they said that it is quite a wide reach, that community radio station. And I'll be there maybe an hour and a half before I leave. But I'm outside that now. Back home, you know, because I'm not into publicity, I don't want to mislead you. I have no contact with the internet, Zim online, and so on. Apart from just reading the internet, also like everybody else. But in terms of propagating my views or positions through the internet, no. But again, it's like I was saying, you must understand the, how do I call it, the generational gap that exists between my generation and you people. The challenge is basically to close that gap, in the sense that you should be able to advise us what to do, and that we give you the space to do it, and then we see what happens. Because often people say no because they don't know what you are talking about, isn't it? So you need to find a way which basically to communicate to the leadership your ideas so that they can take it on board. Once they warm up to it, and generally it's always better, I'm sure you'll agree, it has to be someone, you know, when you want to bring about change, if you start it in a vacuum, you won't go very far. So you must study the elements involved, and then say, how do I bring about this change? You start talking maybe to one person you think occupies a critical position. Maybe he also knows you even better, so that there is that element of trust. And once that element of trust is built up and you say a good idea, they give you the space, because at the end of the days, you are, when you start things, you make some mistakes. You need someone who will be able to protect you. and to protect the project so that it remains on course. Because some of these things may not be overnight things, but you need it over time. And once the people get to know, then you find it takes off. So the point I'm making is that we are available for advice. But if you are looking for those initiatives to come from us, then maybe your expectations are misplaced. Because we are not as exposed as you are. So sometimes you take for granted a lot. You understand? All I do on my computer is basically email and going into the internet, only for something in reading newspapers. That's all. Anything outside that, she was basically showing me a lot of things she's doing on the iPad. Apparently, most of our meetings she was recording, and she was now playing back, and she was even saying, this can be given to ZBC. Say the interviews that I conducted, the meetings that I conducted, which she recorded. Now, all that I wouldn't know until she told me. So, don't take for granted. That's my answer. But we are ready to be advised, available to be advised.
Mr. for giving us this chance. As a Zimbabwean, I've always desired to take back the skills, the knowledge that I've gained since I came to this country, especially in the Ministry of Health, because that's where my specialty is. My question or my suggestion is either question or suggestion, is there any opportunity for skilled Zimbabweans who are in the diaspora to join up together, or would we have an opportunity or a chance to do it, to join up together with our skills, the occupational therapists, the doctors, the nurses, the physiotherapists, to join up together and do something significant for the health system of Zimbabwe, including the pharmacists as well? Is there any chance for us to come to Zimbabwe and say, here we are, we've got the skills, we need to do something within the Ministry of Health?
You know, to do that, you must first be organized. Isn't it, Madam Cousin? You must be organized. You are basically talking about people from those various disciplines who are working here in the UK. Now, to get to a point where you say, we are now organized as medical fraternity, it's a big challenge, both in terms organizationally and also in terms of resources. But once you are doing that, it makes it easier to engage the Ministry of Health and Child Welfare, isn't it? And be able to talk and say, what can you offer? Are we talking about some of the skills being repatriated back to Zimbabwe or not? What exactly are you saying you can offer to the Ministry of Health? Are you saying you can act as consultants? You know, so only you can tell. I'm not a health person, but only you can tell. But I think the biggest challenge that I find with you Zimbabweans here is basically to be able to get organized. I think you are too much of individuals, or maybe small little groups. But sometimes don't start it too big. It's just enough, for instance, for just psychiatrists to organize themselves as psychiatrists and say, what can we do? You know, in Zimbabwe, our psychiatric services just collapsed. You know, under the Ministry of Justice, I lead the Ministry of Justice, as you know. Under the Ministry of Justice, if someone who is mentally ill commits a crime, could be murder, what have you, the first thing is, first, if he's mentally ill, it's not a crime. You understand? Yeah. But to prove that he's mentally ill, you need a psychiatrist, isn't it? Now, to find those psychiatrists to certify a patient or an accused person that, given what I've studied, this person is schizophrenic. We don't have those nurses. Those doctors. In Chikara, the whole country, there were probably 2 psychiatric doctors. So that gives you an idea of the gap that exists. So I can't see any reason, for instance, either, let's take the psychiatrists, doctors. They should come home if they want to help. If they don't come home, they could work out, for instance, periods when they can come to lecture to train other psychiatrists.
Yeah.
You understand? They could come just for 1 month to the University of Zimbabwe or National University. They do lecturing and paid for. Why more? And that is the sort of thing, contribution they can make. So the scope of contribution you can make is enormous. But you need to be organized. And I think to start with, it would be very good to get organized, starting with this on a smaller scale.
Those people who are in the diasporas in Africa, they have already started doing that. I know quite a number who have engaged the universities. They, as lecturers, they have various projects. Let's say a lecturer in Namibia is in a project, with maybe Canada. They build in that project a situation whereby that lecturer and others will come they'll come to the University of Zimbabwe and assist and teach and also supervise the students from their home countries. Just like you can also offer the Ministry of Health to say you can help them with this kind of analysis that is required, and you make an analysis, you give back to the minister. But minister, what has been problematic with most of the people in the diaspora, I should say, is to expect that the government is going to stand on the door and say, we have this problem, that problem, that problem. We need you A, you need you B and C to come and assist us on 1, 2, 3. You need to offer yourselves to say, I am available, or we are. My expertise is, and this is what I can offer. And most of the time, if we put the money issues ahead, we normally don't get anywhere. You find that if you can be the one to mobilize the resources, to mobilize the projects, to mobilize the linkages, then, automatically that is very welcome.
I understand what could be the expectations of the diasporans, but all the same, I'm talking this from experience. I feel it's not like saying we are expecting the government to come and knock on the door and say, we are desperate, we need this project. But I think the government also have the responsibility to create the incentives, realizing that their children who have gone out there have these skills that they are required. We didn't know that there are no psychiatrists in Zimbabwe until yesterday. But now if the government in its various disciplines, various ministries would actually put incentive, let's say, to the Zimbabweans all over the world, you may actually get responses not in the diaspora, but even in Zimbabwe, in the private sector.
Can I add to that? Some of them may not be incentives because it's, I've worked with governments before and I know it's difficult for us to say, oh, the government can just give an incentive.
No, when I say incentive, it's not something of a benefit. But
no. Okay. What I'm saying is, what I think is very fair, because a lot of governments, especially I know Nigeria, for instance, they recognize that when someone's bringing those skills, they'll make it easy for them to engage. Because as things stand right now, if you go back to Zimbabwe, and you're just going to have to now go into the job market. So it makes it very unattractive for someone who's here to want to go back. So a lot of them may not be necessarily incentives of saying, well, we're going to pay cash like what the British government did with nurses and carers here. But at least incentives where, it's easier for them to get into perhaps more senior positions. Maybe if they're bringing certain skill set.
Let me correct my words.
In the health sector, a lot of that is happening. A lot of that is happening. We do have challenge on the budget to the extent that we have been training nurses and we are not able to place them. Right. And they have already started, I think, if I recall, there is now some scheme to try to place them in our neighboring countries.
Yeah,
yes, where we are negotiating with Namibia, with Botswana, maybe any country that would want the services of our nurses, because we don't want to stop. Because currently it's not like we are overstaffed, but there are budgetary constraints, and because of that we are unable to absorb what we are producing. Because what I would want to see, for instance, right from the outset, is a database of who is in the diaspora, including qualifications, and where they are, email, and so on. If we can create that database, that is already going a long way. For instance, people don't know that there are international jobs in the UN system, because we fight for a quota. Say Zimbabwe must have some quota in international jobs, WTO, WHO, WIPO. All these organizations, we are a member, and we have been fighting in Geneva to say all these jobs we want a quota reserved for Africans, because the preponderance is that is everybody else except Africans. Now, it's well and good to say to fight for a quota. If you are granted, it's another thing to say when a vacancy occurs, whom do we put? It would be very good if we had a database which allows us basically to then, through the network, please apply for this job. It's very important.